This is the Sergio Rodriguez Show.
Welcome, everybody, to the Sergio Rodriguez Show, a show unlike any other. Today, a little bit of an unplanned event for us this week. I know we had mentioned speaking about the NBA and some college hoops, and I'm probably going to end up doing that anyway for you guys leading into the weekend. But there was a major trade in baseball today, and I thought that this was a perfect opportunity to bring my former co-host, the guy that I did hundreds of shows with at the Sports Journey Network, my good friend, Chris Oliveira. Chris, how are you?
Sergio, what's going on, buddy?
My man, it's good to have you on. I've been pestering you to get you on, but I know you spend all this time nowadays doing all these soccer shows all over the world. But I need you to give me, because you're a big baseball guy, and you know, when the Mets made this trade today, the first thing I thought about was you, because you've been speaking to me about how inactive Major League Baseball has been with all this stuff. So first of all, before we get into it, let me break down the trade for everyone, and then I want to get your opinion. I have a bunch of questions for you, and then we'll discuss this. Essentially, the Mets sent Ahmed Rosario, shortstop, Andres Jimenez, middle infielder. He did play shortstop a lot towards the end of the year, but he'll probably end up playing second base for the Indians. A pitching prospect named Josh Wolf and an outfield prospect named Isaiah Green for Francisco Lindor and one of your guys, Carlos Carrasco, pitcher who I know you've been very high on over the years. What was your initial thought when this trade went down?
So essentially, the Mets got themselves an all-star shortstop, got themselves one of the top 10 pitchers in the American League for a bag of balls. Is that what you're telling me? That's basically what you're telling me, right?
Well, I disagree with some of these things, but we can discuss that. But my point was, you off the bat, you're telling me everything is good for the Mets, and there's nothing that you can find possibly wrong with this trade.
Yeah, there's a couple of things, but on the surface, this is highway robbery. This was an opportunity that the New York Mets seized on, okay? They understand they have a boatload of money nowadays with their new ownership. They took advantage of the Cleveland Indians, or whatever you call them nowadays, right? The Cleveland baseball franchise. Francisco Lindor is a top 10 player, in my opinion, in the game of baseball. And then you throw on top of that a power arm to match up and go along with Noah Syndergaard. I understand he hasn't really done much, but he's got fantastic stuff, right? Jacob deGrom is one of the best pitchers in baseball, top 3 guys in the game. So this pitching staff gets deeper. Their lineup gets deeper. The one negative on this, Sergio, I have to be brutally honest with you, is obviously Carrasco's health. I believe he dealt with, he overcame cancer or whatever. So that's always going to be a concern, but I still think it's a risk that the Mets would take all day, every day, because you're going to get yourself, along with the Carrasco, you're going to get yourself Francisco Lindor, who, in my eyes, is just a fantastic baseball player, Sergio. So there's some risk, but I don't think any of the risk will be due to Francisco Lindor. I think the risk will be on the Carrasco side.
Okay, let me throw something at you.
Sure.
First of all, to trade, the Mets have to make every day if it pops up. So let's speak about it first from the Mets' point of view. That trade has to be made if it's on the table. Similar to where when we spoke about a couple of years ago when the Yankees traded for Stanton and they basically gave away a second baseman, you had to do it because it's just an overwhelming amount of talent coming back in your favor. But here's a concern that I would have. Here's a concern that I would have if I'm the Mets. Now that you've done the trade, A, is Lindor going to be the type of player that's going to warrant the $250 million he's going to ask for? Because that's what's coming next. 2, Is Carrasco, a pitcher in his mid-30s, going to be a guy that you're okay being tied in to another $40 million? C, you're adding $31 million of payroll this year, and you already added money with the catcher that you signed. Is that now going to stop you from making other moves? Because we could say whatever we want about the owner being rich. We get that. All these owners are rich. But we could say this about this guy in particular. But the fact is that with the uncertainty of the money situation that Major League Baseball finds itself in now due to the COVID situation, not having fans in the stadium and stuff like that, that could be something that today is not an issue. Today you're going to celebrate the trade, but tomorrow could become a problem. What do you think?
Yeah, look, that's a concern with any baseball player because injuries are part of the game. And so obviously with any player, you're always going to run that risk. You mentioned the Yankees and Giancarlo Stanton. That was a phenomenal trade in terms of the potential player you were getting, but I think the risk on that trade was much greater due to Giancarlo's history with injuries. I don't see that history with injuries when it comes to Francisco Lindor.
No. I'm not talking about injuries. I'm just talking about, are you going to pay this guy $250 million to keep him for the next 8 years after this year?
I would. And you and I have disagreed on this off the air. We've talked plenty about this over the last couple of months, really, because I was really pushing for the Yankees. I was hoping, I should say, that the Yankees would find a way to make a trade and acquire the talented Francisco Lindor. But I do think that today's salary, sir, as we talk about often, these salaries are greater than we've ever seen in the game of baseball before. And that's just the going rate for a player of his caliber. This is the type of player that is going to put fans in the seats. He's got a smile. He's going to be the face of the franchise. He's a phenomenal defensive player. But his bat speaks for itself. The guy's going to hit around 30 home runs a game, bat you 280, 285. He's going to score plenty of runs. It all depends on which spot in the batting lineup he's going to bat in, but I still believe this is the type of player you build your team around. We saw what happened with the Los Angeles Dodgers in acquiring a player very similar in Mookie Betts and put him over the top. And I think the Mets, yes, they're a little further away than the Dodgers were prior to acquiring Mookie Betts, but I still do think this is the type of player that can put the Mets over the top. And the one thing about the Mets, we all know, they're not going to be struggling with money. They're not going to have any money problems. And so I don't think this is the last move that we're going to see from the New York Mets. I still think there's more to come. And I think they're going to build themselves a quality team, one of the teams that's going to compete for the World Series coming into next season.
See, I disagree with that money thing because I don't think that any owner in any sport goes into it and invests money from other businesses just to win. I don't think that's going to happen. But, again, that'll be down the road. I do think...
Serge, not to cut you off, but look, we saw George Steinbrenner. You want to say he didn't throw in other businesses' money into his baseball organization, right? Fact of the matter is, you're in New York. The Mets are going to make a boatload of money, with the exception of the New York Yankees, the Boston Red Sox, and maybe the Los Angeles Dodgers, right? The Mets could potentially challenge the Los Angeles Dodgers in terms of money. If not, the Mets should be fourth on their list. So they're going to make plenty of money. Okay, you're in New York City. You have an owner that is a diehard Mets fan, and we know in any business, okay, in sports, especially in sports, we should say these guys come in and initially they're going to throw money into their business. They want this to be successful,
and I get that. But Chris,
is not the type of guy that's going to want to spend $2.2 billion on a baseball team to just let it sit there and rot and not put themselves a competitive baseball team on the field. I just don't see that happening. This guy's a diehard Mets fan. A guy that's tried to acquire the Mets for numerous years now, and now he finally got his toy on his hand, and he's going to build himself a fantastic baseball team.
Okay, personally, I disagree. I don't think that he's going to invest money that he doesn't believe is coming back. I think he's doing these moves, but the two moves that he's really made were really like moves that anybody would have made. I mean, I don't see the big...
Not anybody, Serge. There's only few teams in baseball that could have made this deal because of money. There's only a few teams that could have taken this contract. The one contract with Carrasco, right?
Well, this year, because of the way the COVID situation is.
Yeah, but even in terms, in normal terms, nobody's going to take on a however old he is, a 33-year-old, right, with 3 years remaining on his deal at $38 million. And then the possibility of Lindor walking as a free agent in the offseason. Obviously, I think the Mets will throw everything they can at Francisco Lindor to keep him around. But these money questions, this is the reason why the Mets were able to get him for a bag of balls.
And you just that was the point that I was going to make in reference to why they got him. Everybody's saying that it was highway robbery. But the fact is, the only way that you could get this guy was by taking Carrasco. It was
the same way with the Yankees and Stanton. The only way the Yankees were going to take him was by taking all that money back.
Correct.
It's money.
So that's why I don't look at it as a robbery, because realistically, the Indians are getting what they want. They wanted to get rid of the contract, and they got a middle infield now moving forward. Look, I've been down on Ahmed Rosario. I did an interview with Kenny Davidoff where we went back and forth on him. And I think he's been a disappointment. A guy who was supposed to be the next or one of the top 5 shortstop in baseball based on where he was ranked by Baseball America and everything. And he's come here and he's been a second-tier type shortstop. But
all you have to tell people regarding Ahmed Rosario is if he hasn't been a disappointed and he was everything he was supposed to be, they wouldn't be trading for Francisco Lindor.
100%. And then Jimenez, who actually basically took his job last year, will probably move to second base. Now, here's one thing that I know you're saying that the Mets are going to throw the kitchen sink to try to keep him, but here's a thing I'm going to throw at you if you're the Mets. Would you rather next year, there's going to be about 5 quality shortstops available in free agency. I'm talking about guys like Trevor Story, guys, Seager, right? Mm-hmm. Those guys, I think, if you look at their numbers, and I went and looked at the per 162 for the top shortstops in the game, okay? And if you look at 6 or 7 of them have better or equal number to Lindor. Now, are they box office guys? No. Trey Turner's a guy that no one knows, but Trey Turner hits for a higher average, drives in, score, what? Excuse me?
Ridiculous baseball player. Ridiculous.
Right? He scores more runs. He averages 7 less home runs, but more hits. So my point is, you might be able to get higher on base. You might be able to get a guy like a Seager, like a Turner, like a Story, a Seager, somebody in that realm, and basically get them to give you the same production, or let's say 90% of the production at about 50% of the price. What do you say to that?
Well, I disagree. I think every single one of those guys you mentioned, the Seagers, the Turners, the Story, those guys are all going to get money, Serge. Those guys are all going to get paid. Maybe not as much as Francisco Lindor, because I think he's the most established of the bunch, but they're all going to get paid. It's not like one guy's going to get $30 million and the other guy's going to come in at $30 million.
I disagree, no man. I disagree.
Okay, we'll
I disagree, and I'm going to tell you why I say that. And I'm going to tell you why I say that. Because a guy like Trevor Story, who has been really doing it for 4 years already. I mean, he's been in the league 5 years, okay? A guy like Trevor Story, if you look at his salary, he basically signed last year for $9 million. Now, he got, I guess he's going to get 18 in arbitration, but he was a guy who was essentially a $9 million ball player. He's going to get 18 million now this year, 18 and a half. But realistically, you think he's going to be what? 150 million? You think he's going to get more than 150 million?
Well, it all right now. I think the uncertainty because of COVID and what's going on around the world, we're in uncharted territory. don't really. I mean, in regular times, absolutely 100%. Due to the COVID, we just don't know with all the uncertainty.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. But that's what I'm saying, Chris. That because of that, you might be able to let Lindor walk next year and still end up with a really good shortstop at half the price.
But we don't know if that's going to affect Lindor as well in terms of
see. Okay.
Again, we'll have to wait and see. I think that everything, the one guy in that whole conversation, right, is Seager. He's been injured a lot. So, Turner's been injured a lot as well over the last few years. But when he's healthy, the guy, he is ridiculous. He puts up ridiculous numbers. Seager's the one guy that's really been injured the most, and I think he's going to be the one mostly affected because he came back and his stats weren't the same, and it took him a while to get back to the level. He had a good playoff run, but prior to that, he struggled a bit. So I think he's going to be the one that's going to lose out the most as far as financially. But the other guys, they're going to put up numbers. They're going to get paid similarly to one another.
Let me cut you off for a second. Let me cut you off for a second, just to tell you something that I looked up here really quick while you were talking. Last year, Trevor Story, or 2 years ago, off the big home run year, 2 years, $27 million. I just don't know if these shortstops are gonna. I will bet you that Lindor basically doubles what these guys may, and they're similar in age. And I just think that those guys, from a production standpoint, you're gonna get basically the same. Look,
he might double Seager. He's not doubling Turner because everybody in the game of baseball knows how great Turner is.
I understand, but Seager's numbers are the same.
But Seager's been injured a lot, and that's the problem. He's been injured.
And that's the one thing I will say about Lindor. The guy plays $155 every year.
And the other thing, Story. The one thing he's got going against him is, I should have been prepared coming into this conversation.
I'm prepared for you. How's that? Because I know where you're going. We've done a lot of radio. You're going to go to the splits, right?
See a split. Yes, I want to see a split.
But
I think that's going to be the one knock on him.
Yeah, there are. His splits were bad.
Okay.
See, throw last year out because last year everybody was crazy. But the year before that, I know that in a conversation that we had on the air one time, that year 19, there was a significant difference in his splits. There was.
So that right there will answer, gives you the reason as to why maybe contractually he's not going to get the same amount of offers as Lindor. The one thing about Lindor is he's got the personality, he's got the smile. Every time he's been at the bright lights, he's been up in a big moment in the playoffs, All-Star game. He is the type of guy that you build your franchise around that's going to bring fans out to the stadium. He's just, the perfect package. He's a 5-tool player.
Xander Bogaerts got 6 years, $120 million. I think Xander Bogaerts is every bit as good as Lindor.
Serge, here's the thing, man, and you know this as well as anybody. There are guys that once they're highly touted from a very young age, right, they're always going to have that cachet around them. These guys are always going to make more money because they've been highly touted.
And that's why these GMs,
nobody's paid attention.
And that's why these GMs get fired. Because let me tell you something. The other thing that that somebody said to me today, so I was having this discussion back and forth about this, and I said to him, Gleyber Torres, for example, in his 2 full seasons, because again, I'm not going to get into last year with anybody, because even Lindor was terrible last year. I'm not even going to speak about last year. But Gleyber Torres is 34.96 on his, per 162, right? Mm-hmm. And the person I was speaking to was actually my nephew, Steven. He says to me, yeah, but Uncle Serge, what about defense? That has to matter. I said, let me tell you something about defense. Number one,
ain't nobody paying $200 million for defense.
1,000%. And listen, you know what, too, Chris? Defense stopped mattering when all these shifts came in. Who covers ground anymore? Right? That's number one. Yeah. Number two, I went back and looked at something. Who won the World Series this year?
Dodgers.
They beat the Tampa Bay Rays.
Who's their shortstop?
No, wait a minute. The kid, the shortstop of Tampa Bay is Adames, Dominican kid.
Yeah, I know.
No. Here goes my thing. You know how many Gold Glove winners those two teams had combined? One, Mookie Betts. 2 years ago, the Nats beat Houston in the World Series, right? You know how many Gold Gloves those two teams combined for? 0.
Unfortunately, the defense today doesn't have the importance it had back in the days.
100%. That's why I laugh every time somebody brings up Gary Sanchez and not catching. I always tell you, well, when you find me a catcher that'll hit 35 and drive in 100, then you can have whoever you want. Then you can have Johnny Bench back there if you want. Then
look. You and I disagree over this, over these subjects over and over. I always think you should be an above average, at the very least, you should be an above average defensive player at the catching position, and in particular at the first base position. You should be above. I think all the other positions, the defense is not as important as it used to be. I think the shift took away the beauty of the defense of the defensive game. You look back at when we were growing up, when we were young, right? And you had the beautiful double play combinations of Omar Vizquel and Roberto Alomar, which to me is the greatest defensive pairing I've ever seen in the middle of any infield. If those two guys could have played together in the same teams in today's baseball, I mean, the shifts would take away that beauty. I mean, we wouldn't be talking about these guys and being, world class Gold Glovers. I mean, they are arguably the greatest defensive players in the history of the game at that position.
I'm glad you went there because I want to stay on subject with the Mets here. Convince me as a Met fan about this. You went to Roberto Alomar. Roberto Alomar, another guy who came from Cleveland here and left his game in Cleveland.
Carlos Baerga.
Left his game in Cleveland. Bobby Bonilla. I'll tell you what, the Mets paid a lot of money for Johan Santana and Beltran, and they made one. I guess they went to the playoffs.
Beltran put up numbers.
Beltran did put up numbers, but they really didn't do anything with him. They went to one playoff with both of them. And Santana threw a fake no-hitter.
And that was it. And they stretched him.
And he was never the same. Pedro Martinez. What about the left field? What about the left fielder? What about the left fielder? Jason Bay. The Mets have had a lot of guys.
Him and Bobby Bowe, before joining the Mets, they both left their game in Pittsburgh. But the Mets have been unfortunate. But
yeah, they have been. No, they've hit on some guy. I mean, listen, Piazza was phenomenal. Beltran was great for them. I don't know if they've hit on players of this caliber. The players that they've hit on have been middle of the road kind of guys. Now look,
Robin Ventura, Todd Zio, those guys.
Come on, listen. Timo Perez, right? By the way, let's stick to this here.
Benny Abayana, that guy won the MVP.
Benny Abayana,
every spring season, he won the MVP. Spring ball.
All right, stop clowning the Mets. That's not why we're here.
I'm not clowning the Mets. I'm just bringing up.
No, you're clowning the Mets.
No, I'm actually applauding the Mets. I think what the Mets are doing is tremendous. So I don't mean that in a negative way.
Remember that time that guy, we were doing a show live at a restaurant in it was at a sports bar in. It was in Central Jersey somewhere, and this guy was going to smack you after. He wanted to choke you after the show. We had to extend the show like another 45 minutes on the air just because we wanted to make sure he left the parking lot because you were killing the Mets.
Man, let me see. I mean, Serge, I could think of 200 other occasions. I mean, to single one out.
Look,
I think I annoyed somebody every time I did a show.
I know. So, look, let's wrap this up like this. The first baseman, Alonso, terrible year last year. Again, I'm going to give him a pass because of the situation. But he was a big swing and miss guy for that position.
But hey, he beat Aaron Judge's rookie record for home runs, so that's good.
He did. Dominic Smith had a big year last year. He's still going to be a liability in the outfield. I still believe they need a center fielder.
Well, they're working. They're still trying to bring in George Springer. That's what I told you earlier today. That this is the first domino to fall. I don't think the New York Mets are done. I think their owner, that them deep pockets is going to afford the Mets a lot of luxuries, not just in free agents, but in guys like we saw today. Carlos Carrasco, Francisco Lindor. Other teams are not going to be able to pay these guys. They're not going to be able to afford to keep these guys around. And that's the Tampa Bay, the Pittsburgh, the Cincinnati. There's plenty of teams throughout Major League Baseball, right, that don't have the deep pockets. And the Yankees, the Mets, the Red Sox, the Dodgers, they're going to be set up, and they could take financial risks that other teams can't, and they're going to be set up to acquire these players. St. Louis is also a team that'll be set up to take out players. So I think, look, it's bad for the game of baseball, but if you're a fan of these big market teams, this is, you're going to be able to poach players from the smaller teams all day, all season long.
You said something to me today when I spoke to you, when I called you to see if you would jump on with me, that was very interesting, but if you really think about it, also says a lot about what I've been saying during the 25, 26 minutes we've been on. You said to me, Met fans are going to be more excited about Lindor, but Carrasco's going to probably help them win more games. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, if Carrasco is healthy, he's a power pitcher. He's going to be able to come in here and slot in behind the Grom. He might even be number 3.
By the way,
he might even be number 3.
By the way, he was terrible in the playoffs last year.
Yeah, that's fine.
I know, but I know, no, and I agree with you. But listen to what you said. You felt that a guy that's going to go every 5 days is going to have probably have a more bigger impact than a guy that you want to give $250 million to.
Look, it took me a very, very, very long time to admit this, right? And it still hasn't sunk in. But pitching is king. At the end of the day, numbers are going to be sexy, right? Power numbers, but at the end, pitching is king. And when you get a guy with the stuff that Carlos Carrasco has, who you're potentially going to slide in as your number 3, at worst your number 3, at best your number 2 behind the Grom, and then behind what do you call him, Thor, whatever his name. What's his name?
Syndergaard, Thor.
Yeah. If you got those 3 guys throwing 100 miles an hour, back to back to back, and I know nowadays these teams don't line up the way they used to back in the days, but to keep it in our terms, right? You have Carrasco, your number 3, going up against the opposition's number 3. He's going to dominate, Serge. He's going to dominate. And so I think he's going to come in. The Mets have really struggled over the last couple of seasons to find that guy behind the Grom. I know they've had, a couple guys pop in here and there, but realistically, not at a consistent level. This guy will be able to pitch consistently. Obviously, health is a concern, but if he's healthy, he's going to be able to pitch consistently. The other guy that everybody's in love with is a guy that hasn't won, 15 games in his career or 20 games in his career? How many games is Thor won in his career? Not a lot.
He's over 15, but but he hasn't won a lot. Listen, to be fair, DeGrom hasn't won a lot. But then again, they say wins don't matter anymore. That doesn't matter anymore. They keep standings. But wins don't matter.
I think that you just play rotisserie like we do in fantasy. Just rotisserie. Whoever has the most home runs wins. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the year, just add the stats up, and we'll see where we're at.
Yo, man,
I'm with you, Serge. You and I. When it comes to baseball and other sports as well, we agree on a lot of things, and it just things that used to be important or no longer important.
But it's funny, Chris. But the thing that gets me is they tell me that it's not important because relievers are more prominent now. Meanwhile, the only time a reliever has ever won the MVP was in the 80s when Willie Hernandez won it. The Rivera was Rivera and Wetland and Stanton and all those guys in 96 are the difference. Relief pitching is the reason why the Braves only have 1 title and the Yankees won 4 in the 90s. But now they're telling me that relief pitching matters now and not then. Okay, I guess maybe I'm watching something different. But Chris, listen, man, thank you for popping up with me. Every time between now and baseball season when it starts, man, I'm going to call you and bother you to come on with me all the time. I appreciate your time and you're always there for me. I appreciate you, brother. Every time we go on and it's like being back doing our daily show, man, I appreciate it.
Yeah, always my pleasure to be on with you, Sergio, and keep up the great work. Anytime you need me on, just holler, and I'll be here. Maybe we could talk some soccer on one of your shows one of these
Yo,
days.
I told you I know my soccer, bro. I'm telling you, you got to give me a shot.
Yeah, we can talk about it on your show, not on mine.
Speak about my. What? You don't want me to go on your show and talk about how Neymar plays for the light company?
Bro, Harry, see, this is why you won't come on my show.
Doesn't he play for PSENG?
There's no N.
Oh, okay.
Paris Saint-Germain. They just abbreviated. PSG.
My bad.
PSG. But I don't blame you because I've done that. I've made that mistake myself. PSG. Like you grew up in Jersey. It's PSG Electrical Company is the first thing you fall back.
But that's why you worked for Sirius all those years, and ESPN got rid of me.
Yeah, because I was able to identify my electrical company before. Absolutely.
Chris, stay out of trouble, man. All right, man. You've been listening to the Sergio Rodriguez Show, a show unlike any other.